Warning: this content may be sensitive to some audiences. When I was asked to tell this story, a lot of emotions rose to my throat, and I know that's really significant. Some moments are too unforgettable to be erased. That night remains one of the most outstanding ones in my life. I think at that time I considered myself a police force novice. I was 25 years old, good physical shape, and lots of enthusiasm and bravery. Today, even at 50, thinking and recalling it, I tend to get goose pimples all over. It was a typical night in the favela until we got a call. Domestic dispute with a knife. My partner João and I went straight there. The house was at the end of a seemingly endless staircase. We ran up, each step a struggle against gravity and fear. It felt as if it was a scene out of a horror film when we finally reached the summit, blood spattered on walls, strewn about on the floor. We were scared, despite our weapons and knowledge. We stood at the entrance, looking at the bloody mess. Bloodstains, as if someone had smeared it all over the house. We wondered if we should go in or wait for backup. But something pushed us inside. What was in there? We decided to enter. The smell of blood was strong, nauseating. We walked slowly, stepping in the red puddles. Then we saw her. A woman aged 60 or 70 was standing there, completely drenched in blood and with more than 20 knife wounds on her body. And the creepiest part? She was standing, walking around the house, mumbling. She looked at us and, with a voice that wasn't hers, said everything was fine. It was a deep, almost otherworldly voice. We froze. How could someone in that state be standing, let alone talking? She had stab wounds on her arms, chest, head, neck. João and I were terrified. We called for backup immediately. While we waited, she kept talking, rubbing against the walls, spreading more blood. When the paramedics arrived, they laid her on the stretcher, immobilizing her. She kept talking, sometimes asking for help, sometimes saying everything was fine. More than 4 police officers saw her and spoke with her. The mobile ICU arrived with an experienced doctor. He examined the woman and called the sergeant. He said she had been dead for more than 2 hours, and we were contaminating the crime scene. We were outraged. How could she be dead if she was talking and walking around just now? The doctor didn't believe us, accusing us of tampering with the scene to clear it faster. One of my colleagues, furious, grabbed the handcuffs and asked the sergeant if he wanted to arrest the doctor for insubordination. The doctor backed off, got into his vehicle, and went to the hospital. We were furious with the doctor's attitude, but he was right about the woman being dead. Inside the house, almost all of her blood was spread around. Later, we found out who called the police. Her own husband. I never understood what happened that night. How could a dead woman be standing and talking to us? I spent several nights without sleeping as I tried to make sense of it all, only for it to confuse me more. This incident became a subject of gossip for some days among many police officers. Some laughed, thinking we were crazy. Others, more superstitious, believed we had encountered something beyond our understanding. The house was sealed and avoided by everyone, gaining a reputation for being haunted. That night changed my perception of reality. Since then, I never looked at a crime scene the same way. Something in that experience made me question everything I believed to be true. To this day, I avoid talking about it. But on some nights, when the silence is deep, I still hear that voice saying everything was fine. And in those moments, the fear returns, reminding me that there are things in this world that go beyond our understanding. That's why I tell this story. So others know that sometimes the unknown is closer than we imagine, waiting to remind us that true terror knows no bounds. Hello, I am Frank Patterson, and I'm 45 years old. Specifically, I'm a detective in the Crimes Division at the Salem Police Department in Oregon. I have come across many weird things in my lifetime, but nothing like what awaited me at Unit 712 of the ancient tenement downtown. All started with call a resident's not happy smell in apartment number 101. On my desk in a cold autumn morning, and before me was coffee to be had when the call came in. "Patterson, we have a call from a downtown building. Strong smell coming from an apartment, possible body," said my partner Jim, rushing into the room. "All right, Jim, let's check it out," I replied, grabbing my jacket. When we got there, the door was already broken down. What I saw inside, well, nothing prepared me for that. Right at the entrance, a broken cup on the kitchen floor caught my attention. I moved slowly to the bedroom. When I opened the door, the scene froze me in place. "My God, Patterson," Jim muttered, covering his mouth. On the bed, lying in a cross position, was the body of a 74-year-old woman. Her legs hung off the bed together, also forming a cross. Her face, or what was left of it, was just exposed bone, no flesh. The rest of the body was swollen, in advanced decomposition. This is surreal. Who would do something like this? I asked, more to myself than to Jim. The sight was disturbing, like the devil himself had passed through. Next to the body, a small pool of blood and a neck wound that looked like a bullet hole, but 10 times bigger. The woman had no family, no children or close relatives. A knife found in a drawer was sent for analysis. On the blade and in the bathroom sink, they discovered blood traces. "It appears like an attempt had been made by someone to get rid of evidence," Jim said as he looked at the sink with inspection. Nothing can describe the distress I felt at that time. 3 days before that, I was asleep on my bed together with my dog, Bella. At around 3 a.m., she began to bark wildly at the bedroom door, an occurrence that had never taken place before. "She has never done this before, Jim. Bella has always been calm. Now I think maybe she was trying to warn me somehow," I reflected aloud. "Patterson, you know it could be a coincidence. But we can't rule out anything, right?" Jim replied, trying to stay calm. The strangest thing happened during the removal of the body. When the paramedics were about to take the corpse, the lights in the entire building went out. We were in the dark for about a minute before the power came back. "What was that?" I asked, my voice trembling a bit. "I don't know, but this is getting weirder by the minute," Jim responded, visibly shaken. Despite all efforts, we couldn't find a culprit. There weren't enough traces, and the advanced state of decomposition prevented a more detailed investigation. The case remains unsolved, and the image of that woman, lying in a cross position with a skeletal face, still haunts me. "I just can't seem to stop thinking about that image, Jim. It seems like it's etched in my eyelids," I said as I sipped on my coffee. "I know, Frank. It bothers me too. But we have to keep going and keep looking for answers." Jim tried to comfort me, though he seemed as lost as I was. The knife and the blood traces in the sink indicate that someone killed her and tried to clean up the evidence. Maybe she was used in some kind of macabre sacrifice. The lack of concrete answers leaves me restless. Every detail, from Bella's strange behavior to the lights going out, only adds to the mystery. I feel deep sadness for the death of this woman. The way she died, and the fact that her death remains unexplained, disturb me deeply. Whenever I shut my eyes, I see her skeletal face and body in the form of a cross. It constantly informs me that there are facets of this world we may never comprehend. There are powers above our commando realization. This can't be controlled square up like circle brackets. "Frank, do you see any possibility of getting a clue for this?" Jim asked, sounding more desperate than hopeful. "Honestly, I don't know, Jim, but we have to try. We can't leave it like this," I replied, trying to convince myself as much as him. I learned not to underestimate what I don't know from this incident. There is definitely something evil in the apartment. It seems that darkness is always present around me and may show up when not expected. Without any conclusion, we remain afraid of what we don't know at night and during the day. Life goes on, but the memory of this case will never fade. It has become a part of me, an invisible scar that constantly reminds me of the fragility of life and the incessant presence of the terror that surrounds us. After this case, I started to reflect more on death, life, and the mysteries that surround our existence. Every detail of Apartment 101 is etched in my mind like a horror movie. The broken cup in the kitchen, the body in the cross position, the skeletal face. All of this echoes in my thoughts, a constant reminder that we can't always explain what we see. Frank, there are things we may never understand, but we keep trying. It's what makes us human, Jim said, trying to end the conversation on a positive note. And the question that haunts me is, who or what did this, and why? These are questions that may never have answers. And maybe the real terror lies exactly in that, in the absence of answers. You know, one of those muggy nights where you sweat just from breathing. Dimmy and I were patrolling the ghostly, deserted city. In a patrol ant, a radio spoke with an emergency call. On the other side of a gardens, a man aged about 20 was found dead in queer circumstances. Neighbors reported weird noises and odd movements in the house next door. Naturally, we were the ones who were chosen to investigate. After midnight, the time is said to be past that when strangest things should occur. We thought we had seen everything, but nothing ever could have prepared us for what was coming. We drove in silence, the engine's hum cutting through the night. Upon our arrival, it was like a scene from a horror movie. The sounds of owls and other animals were so horrible that they gave us goosebumps. The house seemed isolated, wrapped in living shadows. We got out of the car, my flashlight shaking in my hand. When we saw bloodstains on the doorstep, my heart missed a beat. We drew our guns and I cried, "Who's there?" Nothing. Just silence. It was such deep silence that everything else was swallowed up within it. We cautiously pushed the door open, and it creaked like some mournful wail. Inside, the house was a sea of darkness, every corner hiding something sinister. We entered cautiously, our eyes scanning for any movement. There were no lights in the living room. The furniture was overturned, and shards of glass scattered all around. The metallic smell of blood thickened the already misty air, along with something rather more rotten. We moved forward, and the echo of our feet sounded like a drumbeat in the void. We arrived at the hallway leading to the rooms. The walls seemed to draw close, and the darkness became physical, as if one could touch it. It was then that my eye caught the first room we came into. My feet refused to move any farther. Right inside the center of the same room was that youth, suspended there by a cord from above. His face was terribly afraid, so much so that his pupils dilated, as if seeing what finished him. I cautiously stepped forward, flashlight revealing his pale, ghastly face. Dimey already began the quest for any evidence in the room. That's when we heard a whisper, a low murmur coming from everywhere at once. "Did you hear that?" I asked in a voice just above a whisper as my heart raced. Dimey nodded, his face pale, mirroring my fear. Something's wrong here. We kept exploring the house, each corner revealing new horrors. In the kitchen, we found weird symbols painted on the walls with something that looked like blood. They seemed to be some ancient evil ritual marking the way to something wrong about to happen. In one of the rooms, we found a diary. Its pages were total of relentless scribbling and descriptions of whispering voices and visions of moving shadows in the dark, with a growing sense of dread of something indescribable approaching. We understood that the guy was tormented by something beyond our understanding as we read the diary. A feeling of unease washed over me. The words seemed to come alive, and shadows around us moved. Then we heard footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from upstairs. We crept up the stairs, cautious with our weapons. Each step creaked under our feet, an echo through the house like a muffled scream. At the top, a long hallway stretched out, doors closed on either side. The sound had come from the end of the hall, a door that was slightly ajar, showing nothing but darkness. We approached, the tension in the air almost palpable. I pushed open the door, and the torchlight revealed an empty room with just one chair in the center. On the chair sat an old doll that seemed to watch us. Abruptly, a door behind us banged shut and kept us here in this stifling room. The air seemed to plummet to frigid temperatures. White clouds began to form with our exhalations. Then the doll started laughing, a deep, malevolent laugh, laughter that one knew could only bode ill. It was as though the house was watching and testing us, gripped by fear. This was a primal terror I had never felt before. All at once, the laughter stopped. Back was the oppressive silence. The door opened by itself, and we did not hesitate to leave that accursed room. Descending the stairs felt like escaping from a nightmare. Every step brought us back to reality. Upon exiting the house, relief was overwhelming. Yet we knew something had been left behind, something we couldn't explain, but that something would continue to haunt that place. We screamed for backup and reported what we were witnessing, but deep down in our hearts, we knew that no one was going to believe the extent of the horror we had seen. That night, the silence between Demi and me in the cab ride back to the station was heavy. We had gotten out alive, but something inside us changed. We had touched the unknown, seen what we shouldn't have seen, and we knew we wouldn't ever be the same again. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying.